Hello again. I'm calling, well, this is my Good Friday broadcast. I mean, after all, if the Pope can do it, then I don't see why I shouldn't be able to do it. And look, I've got my special hat on for this. So obviously, being Good Friday, I'd like to talk about religion. I don't want to talk about the resurrection of Jesus or anything like that. All of which, of course, I believe is absolutely legendary. Although you could read quite a bit into it if you like and have a bit of a laugh out of it. But I'd like to talk about God, the omnipotent God who cannot make a mistake, the infallible God that cannot make a mistake. And I'd like to refer to the first two stories in the Bible. The story of the expulsion of Lucifer and the fallen angels from heaven, and the story of Adam and Eve. Now, the great monotheistic religions, the two greatest ones, Islam and Christianity, have literally probably about 2 billion people in the world that believe in this garbage to some extent. And you talk about it when you're really young, when you, particularly me, I went to a Catholic school. I didn't really understand it, but when you're about 5, 6, they start teaching you this stuff as though it's fact. And most people do accept it as a sort of kind of factual fairy story, if you like, because they used to tell us, you know, I remember the first thing I ever, Jack and the Beanstalk and stuff like that. Well, it's on that level, really, Jack and the Beanstalk. And I think Jack and the Beanstalk is more likely to have happened than the story I'm about to relate to you out of the Bible that millions of people believe. But anyway, it's just maybe a bit light-hearted, if you like. And it's a Good Friday. It's a holiday. And outside, God has blessed his people with shining sun. And temperatures are almost 0. And it's probably going to snow on Easter. Odds on in Ladbrokes it is. So anyway, let me get on to my sermon. God. The omnipotent God who cannot make a mistake. That all these people worship and fear. Well, in fact, he has, and I say he because, you know, God really hasn't got a prick and balls, has he? And yet everybody refers to him as he. But how can he be a he when God has no sex whatsoever, even though he has got a son and something called the Holy Ghost? So don't ask me about the Son, the guy that was crucified, and don't ask me about the Holy Ghost, because that's just a little bit too much for me. But in the beginning there was God, and just God and nothing else. And then God created heaven. And he might have been a bit lonely, although if you're God, how can you be lonely? And how would you have to create anything? Because you're God anyway, and so therefore you wouldn't have an ego in which you'd have to create things. But anyway, he creates heaven, and he creates all these angels, and his favourite one is called Lucifer, and there's another one called Michael. Well, to cut a very long story short, according to the Bible, or according to what I was taught, and according to what billions of people believe, Lucifer suddenly decided that he wanted to take over like a gangster movie. So, this God, he ain't so omnipotent. He didn't know that I was planning to take over, did he? So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take over. All right, I might fail in my endeavour, but it's worth having a go. And so he did. But not only did he have a go, but he got together like a tumultuous multitude of dissatisfied angels. So we had the first revolution. So there in heaven, where the omnipotent God, who should have seen this coming, was threatened and tried to be overthrown by Lucifer, for whatever reason Lucifer wanted to do it. Apparently God, the omnipotent but somewhat fickle God, had transferred his affections to Michael, the archangel. And I think Lucifer was a bit jealous of this. He used to be top guy. Now you got this other guy, Michael, coming in, like, you know. He's thinking, oh, look, I'm going to do this Mickey guy. I don't want him to be second in command, like I am. I want to get rid of him, and I want to get rid of this God guy. We're going to have a revolution. So they had a revolution, an uprising, whatever you want to call it. There was a big battle in heaven, and the fallen angels, the bad guys, were expelled, and they went to another place called hell, where all the wicked angels went, and Lucifer became Satan. And that's it. They were expelled from heaven. The first revolution, I don't know for what reasons it was, probably authoritarian reasons, so therefore as an anarchist you couldn't really go along with it. Why replace one guy with another? Maybe Lucifer might have been better, maybe, well, at least he had more imagination, at least he had a bit of, probably had a, you know, a kind of pleasure circuit. It was probably like, knew how to have a bit of fun. He definitely knew how to sin, and as they say, sin is fun, or as I say, sin is fun, because everything that's supposed to be sin seems to be fun, and everything that seems to be holy and good seems to be utterly boring and self-destructive. So that's a very interesting story. The omnipotent God doesn't foresee that there's going to be a revolution in heaven, or an attempted revolution. And I can remember the words of John Milton, the great English poet of the English Revolution, and he puts these words into the devil's mouth. And although, of course, as an anarchist, I can't go along with it, but it's most poetic. And it is better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven. Or is it better to reign? Yeah, it's better to reign in hell than it is to serve in heaven, which I think is an excellent sentiment altogether. So we fast forward to God again being rather bored, like, so he decides to create the world in 7 days, which of course we read about in the Bible, completely fictitious event that took billions and billions of years to happen, but is condensed into 7 days. And on the 6th day, God rested. So there in the Bible, God rested. So if he rested, he must have been tired. But how could the omnipotent God have got tired and had to have rest? I don't know. That's not my contradiction, that's their contradiction, and that's what billions of people believe, the poor suckers. But I think the most interesting story in the Bible is the story of Adam and Eve, which is the first thing that we learn. Of course, we learn about the Christmas and the crucifixion and all the miracles, but the story that really stuck in my head was the story of Adam and Eve. Now, first of all, God creates Adam. And then God realizes, well, you know, Adam's getting a bit bored there in this Garden of Eden, where everything's perfect. We don't have to do any work, we don't have to hunt for food, everything's provided. I mean, I don't know what they had in the Garden of Eden. Did they have like 53-inch colour tellies, or was it just that you could reach up and pluck a fruit from the trees, and you know, the temperature was so good you didn't have to wear any clothes or anything? But anyway, God realized that Adam needed a companion, so he creates woman, and he creates woman from one of the ribs of Adam. So that woman is incomplete from the very beginning, just being an appendage, a bit of a rib really. So there you have Adam and Eve living in the Garden of Eden, utterly content. But God has only put one thing on them. He said, look, you're in the Garden of Eden. It's absolutely perfect. You've got everything you want, right? There's only one thing that I forbid. There's only one thing that you shouldn't do. You see that tree over there, the tree of knowledge? You're not to eat any fruit from the tree of knowledge. You can do anything else you want. You're in paradise. You've got everything that you want forever. But whatever you do from that one tree, do not pluck a fruit. Well, obviously, I mean, if somebody tells you not to do something, particularly some bearded patriarchal figure, and obviously you're going to think, I wonder what would happen if I did eat that fruit. You know, maybe I'd like, you know, be like God himself. Maybe I would gain all the knowledge. After all, that's what it's called, the tree of knowledge. Enter the devil, disguised as a snake apparently, or a serpent. and says to Eve, "Hey Eve, this God guy, he ain't what he used to be. I took him on once and he got rid of me. But if you eat from that tree of knowledge there, you will become like God." That's why it's called the tree of knowledge, you see. You'll know everything, You won't need this God anymore. You'll be a God yourself, probably. So, Eve, being female, and remember females have suffered for this, for thousands of years because of this legend. Woman, the temptress. Go out on high heels on a Saturday night and a short dress and you're going to be raped. And it's all your fault for being a temptress. So say people from the Muslim community, the Christian community, and even liberals on the media, don't dress provocatively. It all goes back to Eve. It's all her fault. So anyway, Eve eats the apple or whatever it is. And then, and is tempted by the serpent. And then goes to Adam and says, "Oh, look, nothing happened to me. I ate the fruit. Have a go." And Adam was, well, all right then. He has a go. He eats from the fruit of the tree of knowledge. God finds out and is well pissed off. So pissed off, in fact, that he expels them from the Garden of Eden and says to them, "Right, you're going to have to suffer now. You're going to have to give birth to children. You're going to have to work by the sweat of your brow. You're going to suffer, and they were expelled from paradise." So what do we read out of this parable? Well, one could obviously give it a Freudian interpretation. The serpent, tempting Eve. Obviously the serpent representing some sort of penis, because obviously in God's Garden of Eden in paradise there was no sex, because there was no need to breed or anything like that. So there was no sex. So I would imagine that basically, if you want to put a Freudian interpretation to this whole thing about the tree of knowledge, Eve being tempted by the substitute penis, and with the two apples, so you put the two apples together in a snake, what does it look like, right? And so Eve was tempted with that, who then tempted Adam, obviously had sex with him, and God didn't like this at all and threw him out of the kingdom of heaven. But the story I get from is this, that no matter what sort of fool's paradise that they were living in, that's when they became human. That's when they became like us, because they defied God. They defied authority. They asserted their humanity. True, they had to be tempted by the devil. Well, we've all got to be tempted by something sooner or later, haven't we, in order to rebel, in order to become ourselves. Otherwise, we will be adult babies all our lives. So that's the story I get out of it, out of these two legends. One, that God, the omnipotent God, who should have seen all this coming, is not omnipotent, so therefore is not God. So he's absolutely worthless, even if he, she, it exists. Absolutely worthless. Can't see what's coming at all. And if you want to look at it from another point of view, when I was 7, I worked this out. That if God knew that this was going to happen, then he knows everything else that's going to happen in the future. And so therefore, whatever I do or anybody else does is preordained. So if I live a saintly life, or a life of absolutely wallowing sin, he will know exactly what's going to happen. So there's nothing really you can do about it. And so therefore you should be like Adam and Eve and just go along with your senses. Just affirm your humanity and do what you want to do. And don't worry about this God who seems to be making so many mistakes. This vile sadist who's going to sort of throw you into hell for masturbating and so on. You can commit mass murder. You can kill thousands of people. But if you believe in God, or if you're anointed by God, or if you've got if you repent on your deathbed and so on and so forth, or if you blow up loads of people with a suicide bomb, you're going to go straight to heaven. So it's okay. Just one word about heaven and hell as well, these imaginary phantom places. The Christian heaven seems to be really boring, floating around on a cloud, plucking a harp and so on, and really boring. The Muslim heaven seems to be a bit more interesting, particularly if you're a male. But then again, it sounds really boring. I mean, who Alright, a couple of million years in paradise with 67 virgins and lakes of wine, and you don't have a hangover in the morning. Oh, it's the hotline. It must be God. He's after me. Well, I'm going to ignore God, as I've ignored God since I was about 7, so we can't have any of that. Yeah, cut him off. See, he ain't all that omnipotent, is he? But of course, if my mobile phone starts ringing, then I'll know that, like, you know, he's on to me. But then again, he would have known I was going to make this. He would have known that you were going to listen to it, and he would have known if you were going to be corrupted or not. And you probably are being corrupted listening to this load of rambling rubbish. But is it any more rubbish than what's being preached in St. Peter's Square today? All these homophobes dressed up in drag and so on, telling women that they can't have abortions, telling gay people they're wrong to have sex and so on, and telling everybody that they can only have sex in marriage to procreate. That's all a load of old rubbish. And that's for the Muslim paradise. Even if you'd get bored of it, wouldn't you? Waking up every morning, having sex with a load of virgins and so on, drinking from the lake of wine. Wouldn't take me a million years to get bored from it. It would probably take me about, I don't know, probably about a year and so on to get really bored of it. I'd be knocking on the doors of hell. Let me in. Because if hell is everything that's the opposite of heaven, if such a place exists, let me in. I don't mind shoveling a bit of coke once every now and again into the furnaces to keep us all warm in hell, as long as there's plenty of sex and debauchery and whatever it is. Because obviously it's going to be the opposite of heaven, and if heaven's just floating around on the cloud and hell is, like, you know, full of sex and debauchery, and obviously you might have to do a bit of work, as I say, shovel a bit of coal and so on, maybe tempt a few humans on the planet, then do it. Go to hell. Hell's more interesting than heaven. But really, these are imaginary places. The harm that all this stuff does, it has warped billions and billions of human minds, warp them, give them only a tiny percentage of their ability. It's created guilt, it's created hatred, it's created wars and so on, and it's created hatred of women in particular. So my Good Friday message is religion, you can stuff it. God is a moron. God is a phantom. God does not exist. God is not omnipotent. God is just the twisted figment of people's imaginations. Now, you're not going to believe this. It's the mobile phone. It's God. He's on to me. Hang on a minute. Hello? Listen, God, fuck off. So therefore, all I need to do now is to say, have a happy holiday, commit as much debauchery as you can. It's a pity the weather isn't a bit warmer, otherwise you could all go out and fornicate in the parks. But it's freezing cold, so stay at home, in bed, warm, and have lots of sex. Have lots of gay sex, have lots of strange sex, have lots of sex with people that you're not married to, and commit lots of sin. Keep warm this Easter, commit sin. And so until my next broadcast, if I haven't been struck down by the almighty anger of God, I will say bye.